Ford Motor Company has just announced it will produce ventilators to help overcome critical supply shortages. It is partnering with GE Healthcare to expand production of much-needed ventilators each month to treat coronavirus patients. Some very good news there. Ford is also using its 3D printing factories to produce plastic face shields and respirator masks for healthcare workers. More good news. Jim Hackett is the president and CEO of Ford Motor Company, and he joins us from Grand Rapids, Michigan, for his first TV interview about this crisis. Good morning, Mr. Hackett.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So to paraphrase one of my favorite lines from Ford versus Ferrari, this is not the first time that Ford Motor Company has gone to war. You made airplanes and military equipment during World War II. Now in the war against this virus, you're going to be making ventilators. So the big question is, how soon could we see ventilators roll off a line that was making Ford Explorers not too long ago?
Well, I just want to confirm it is in our history, that is chronicled in the Arsenal of Democracy about building a bomber every 63 minutes. We also actually built ventilators way back in history for premature babies and iron lungs when there was the polio epidemic. So these are Ford folks at their best. This is a complicated product, a ventilator, and there's two fronts that we're working on. You mentioned the one with GE. I've talked to Larry Culp via email, and the teams are working really closely. There's a lot of different parts that can be subdivided to suppliers. And then there's a parallel effort that Prime Minister Boris Johnson has asked for our support in the UK. We're working with McLaren and Airbus, and there's a product there that's coming to market. So we're talking about producing hundreds of thousands of these ventilators in the future.
How long do you think it'll take to get them out to hospitals?
Well, that's a great question. The problem is that the lines that have been in place produce hundreds or thousands. We're talking about needing hundreds of thousands. Just to put that in perspective, an F-150, one is built every 52 seconds. So the ventilators, we need to scale as these collective companies come together. We have to scale up something like that. So we're talking about early June, where we don't think it's a problem, but between now and June, it's about ramping up.
And how exactly are you doing it, Jim, since a lot of the Ford plants have closed due to the coronavirus? How are you guys making this happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, because part of the place-dependent workspaces that require people to be on site, a factory is all about working together on a line. So the way these teams are designing the production of this is building sub-assemblies in smaller groups and having them come together to be assembled. But we'll make extremely safe places. In fact, let me just point out that in addition to the ventilator, there's probably a bigger need for these positive air pressure masks. These are masks that cover the face of our caregivers, that move air inside of it. This virus has a tendency to want to enter through your eye, believe it or not, so the air helps protect them. And we have, like in our cooling system in seats, we have little fans that we can backward integrate into a new design for these positive air pressure masks. So those products, in addition to the ventilators, there's actually 2 or 3 different versions of breathing apparatus that we're working on. Hundreds of thousands of the most simplest ones will be starting to be produced in the next week or so. So I'm really excited about both of those fronts getting things active.
That is exciting news. Shifting to the other part of this crisis, which is the economic portion of it, there are an estimated 9 million jobs tied in some way to the auto industry, from the assembly line all the way to the car dealerships. And we're looking at estimates of a 90% drop in car sales in this month as people stay home. How's that going to affect all those jobs?
Well, our primary mission right now, the way Bill Ford and I talk about this, and this is what you get with family kind of derived companies. Our first care is for our people. Back in 2008, Ford didn't take a bailout. The company borrowed enough money to take care of itself back then. We have a fortress balance sheet today. So what we're trying to do is get through this quarantine period where everyone has a job. And then on the other side, quickly rebuild demand. And in fact, something came from our experience in China where people continued to order vehicles online. So this is a really good opportunity to have us scale up quickly.
Mr. Hackett.
And we're working really closely with the UAW, and there's agreement that when it's time to go back to work, everyone's going to go back to work.
Mr. Hackett, very quickly, I know you've tapped into a $15 billion line of credit to get through this. How long are you anticipating it will last?
I have in my head, I think, early May, because we can see what happened in China, we can see what happened in South Korea, and I'm hopeful that we get started before then. We're ready to go.
Hope you're right.
We hope you're right.
Yeah.
Jim Hackett of Ford, thank you so much for being with us.